Winter seems to have finally came through for most, as snow is forecasted across portions of the United States. Plus, severe weather still seems to be hanging around as we look at our next storm system. We'll start with our 500 millibar wind shear. This is where our jet stream is at, and this will kind of give us an idea as to where the next storm systems could be potentially moving on through. And we have one that's currently moving on through right now. It's moving through Dixie Alley and up into the Mid-Atlantic and the Northeast. And as this continues to move about, our low pressure system up underneath it will actually start to occlude and weaken, but not enough before there actually will be some snow up into portions of the northern Appalachians into the Northeast. Meanwhile, we have a new dip in the jet stream that is starting to build over into the western portions of the United States. Expect a lot of rain and maybe even some localized flooding into portions of the West Coast. This will continue to build further and further in towards the Central Plains, creating a bit of a low pressure system that can create severe weather in the south and potentially some significant snow up here into the Midwest. So watch out for that, especially as that moves on through from Monday into Tuesday and Wednesday, potentially even Thursday at the latest, before we start to see that start to move out away from the United States. Now, one thing that I'm definitely watching out for beyond these two systems is that we could probably see another one that could move on through sometime around the 12th, maybe 13th or the 11th, somewhere within that time frame, but it is still up in the air because we are pretty far away. But don't be surprised if we continue to see more and more storm systems after these next two. Now, before I show you guys the simulated reflectivity, I want to go over just a little bit. There is the threat for severe weather here today into portions of Fort Myers and a little bit further south into the Everglades. So a 2 out of 5 on the severe weather scale here, or a slight risk, is evident. The potential for tornadoes is possible, as well as some damaging winds. So please be sure to watch out if you live within those areas. So now we're going to see how things play out. Of course, the time is up in the top left-hand corner. So if you want to follow along, please be sure to do so. But we do have a whole shebang here, so please pay attention to your area. Of course, if I don't specifically talk about your area, then try to find the nearest major metropolitan and just kind of go along with that. But as we play on through, you can see our severe weather starts to kind of move further inland into the late afternoon hours, maybe even early afternoon hours as well. You can see it around noons when it finally starts to move on through. But while this is happening down in the south, up north into the mid-Atlantic, you can start to see some very heavy snowfall that is starting to exist, as well as some freezing rain in some of the areas that are on the eastern sides of the Appalachians. This is mainly because as our low pressure system is starting to spin like a top, we have a lot of this warm air that is starting to collide with some of this cold air, and it is actually melting the snow as it gets closer and closer to the ground as it falls from the atmosphere down. And of course, once you start to have water over the roadways, but it is freezing outside, the water starts to turn to ice. So freezing rain is definitely possible across portions over here in the Shenandoah Valley. And as this continues to move on through up to the north, you can actually see a lot of the warm air turns a lot of this snow into rain. And by the time we get towards late tonight, we can actually see a lot of these areas start to see more and more rain. But what ends up happening over here for portions of the Adirondacks as well as portions of New England is this low pressure system is actually going to turn. It was moving a bit more towards the northeast. Now it's moving east-northeast, and it'll actually parallel the coast of Cape Cod and Long Island to the point to where snow will actually sit over a lot of these areas as this storm starts to occlude and actually weaken a little bit further. So though we will see some snow, it actually won't be some significant amounts unless if you're in the higher elevations. We're probably talking about 3 to 5 inches, maybe in upwards of about 7 to 8 inches possible as you go further and further north. So watch out for that, but we could very well see some high snowfall amounts, maybe 1 inch an hour to maybe even 1.25 inches per hour as a snowfall rate within some of these local areas. So definitely something to watch out for if you are traveling. Of course, I advise that you guys don't travel whenever it's snowing in general, but please be sure to watch out for it regardless as to when it actually is happening. So some of the totals that we can see here, of course, this is the total accumulated snow. This is not meaning that The snow will actually continue to stay on the ground once we get into tomorrow or Sunday, but we do see some higher amounts of snowfall into some of these localized areas along the mountains. You can see here once we get over into the Appalachians and even into the Adirondacks, we start to get about 5 to 8 inches of snow. I think any of those areas that are closest to the furthest easternmost mountain, right? So if we're talking about like South Mountain over here into portions of the Mid-Atlantic, we could probably see lower amounts to maybe even some freezing rain in some of those areas. But if you're further deeper into the Adirondacks, I think you could actually see higher snowfall amounts, even in upwards of a foot to maybe even 1.5 feet of snow. So definitely something to watch out for. And then of course, areas that are along the coastline, I really do believe you guys could actually see just a little bit less, especially if there's a lot of warm air that is around those areas. But realistically speaking, it's actually wherever you are positioned proportionate to where the low is. The northwestern side of the low is usually where the most significant amount of snow is. And you can see this is exactly the case as this moves on through. A lot of very heavy snow into portions of Pennsylvania and even into the eastern panhandle of West Virginia, because it is on that northwestern side of where that low is actually at. So once again, freezing rain is going to be a big issue here because the water is falling onto the ground, but then it's refreezing onto the roads, which of course creates some icy conditions. So a lot of that will likely be along I-81 all the way down towards the border of Virginia, Tennessee, and North Carolina. So please be sure to watch out for that, especially if you are over in the higher elevations. So now we're shifting off towards our next weather system that's going to be moving on through. This is from Monday into Tuesday, and here we have the outlook for Monday, a large 2 out of 5 on the severe weather scale, another slight risk across portions of the coastline in the Gulf Coast. And I'm kind of expecting this to potentially even be upgraded. Potentially a 3 out of 5 is possible. I would say this is going to be mainly for southeastern portions of Louisiana heading into southern Mississippi, maybe even southern Alabama as well, as there's going to be a lot of convergence near that area and potentially some rough patches for some severe weather. We also have the threat for severe weather that is going to be moving off into Tuesday. And personally, I also think this could potentially even make a little bit more noise as well, particularly near the Carolinas, the coastal Carolinas over there. If you're over in Florida and Georgia, you still can get severe weather, but it'd be more of the damaging wind department and maybe even the overnight threat moving over in towards the Big Bend of Florida. But other than that, I think your main areas of supercells, your classic tornadoes and stuff like that, will be located more near the coastal Carolina areas. But let's start to kind of see the big picture here. Our simulated radar as this moves on through. You can see we have our low pressure system that starts to build up and some severe weather starts to exist here. We're talking Monday into Tuesday. A lot of snow could also begin to develop here across the central plains heading into the Midwest, and maybe even a little bit of freezing precipitation in between the two areas. So definitely something to watch out for those that could expect it. And as this moves on through, you can see severe weather is once again going to be likely. A lot of strong damaging winds along this massive cold front that is pushing off into the southeast, and a lot of snow and freezing precipitation moving on into the Great Lakes area here as we head off into the afternoon on Tuesday. We will tackle first the severe weather here in the south. You can see there is a lot of clustering in general, but watch out for these little storms that are here on the southern side. This is moving off into the late evening, into the overnight hours, and a lot of these storms kind of become a little bit more supercellular as they move ashore and move further and further. So areas that are along the I-10 and the I-12 areas should definitely watch out. You can even see this goes all the way over towards Mobile to where there could potentially be some severe weather over near your area as well. This will continue to be the case all the way through overnight into the Tuesday morning hours before we start to see a massive cold front that starts to sweep on through. But into the early afternoon, late morning, early afternoon, we have some storms that start to form out in front of this cold front. which can actually create some prefrontals, some tornadic storms that could try to form out over there, and create water spouts that could move inland, make landfall, and of course turn into tornadoes. So definitely something to watch out for if you live in some of those areas as well. But otherwise, a lot of strong damaging winds that are likely within this storm, especially as this moves off into Tuesday. So now I kind of want to visualize to you guys why I think these specific areas are the more important ones to focus on, though I do believe that anyone that is in those risks that I have mentioned earlier with the convective outlook and the 2 out of 5 in the severe weather scale should still monitor for the potential of severe weather development within your area. But I want to take a look at the vertical velocity. This is where there is a lot of rising in particular spots, which could indicate a lot of thunderstorm activity as well as intensity. So as we play this through from Monday morning into Monday afternoon, you can start to see there's quite a lot of stuff off the coast here of Louisiana. This will start to kind of move further and further inland, and a lot of that activity really starts to kind of get a lot of attention as we move into the evening and the overnight hours. So during dark, past dusk, you guys are going to see a lot of storms in the dark, which means that you probably won't be able to see these storms even coming, regardless if it is still raining or not. So please be sure to pay attention to the National Weather Service, and if they do issue any sort of warnings, make sure you heed it accordingly. And as this continues to play on through into Tuesday, you can see that will continue to be the case over here. You can see in the morning into the early afternoon, we have a lot of these prefrontals that are going to be starting to move off in towards the coast. And that's, once again, exactly what we were just talking about. A lot of these storms could try and produce little water spouts. They could move inland and then, of course, turn into tornadoes. So something to watch out for with that. And then, of course, everywhere else from Brunswick down to Jacksonville and even down to Tampa, you can see there's a big cold front that's going to start to move on through, heading into the late afternoon, early evening hours. Dew points are pretty high in general. You can see that it is into the 60s, almost 70s in some spots, but you can also see how much it is channeled into a small zone, if you will. And so anywhere within these blues is really where you can see that activity, and that will continue to move, kind of like a wave in the ocean. It'll move through and continue to kind of build and build as it moves about. So anywhere within these blues, maybe even the real dark greens, is where you can see the potential for severe weather. But right along the coastline, once again, as I said, is where you could potentially see your highest threat for tornadoes, as well as maybe even some additional large hail amounts that could also be possible. And of course, last but not least, we have to talk about the snowfall from this next event, because it is winter and we are kind of pretty chilly. I mean, it's snowing outside my house right now. Of course, it's going to be snowing in other areas as well. So we got to talk about snow, because that is a hot topic. And heading off from Monday into Tuesday, we can see some localized amounts of about 3 to 5 inches of snow in those blues. Once you get into the purples, that's when you start to get about 5 to 8, especially into those pinks. Pinks might actually be localized amounts of about a foot of snow possible. And then that'll continue all the way up in towards the Kansas City areas, maybe even areas near St. Louis and north of St. Louis, and then heading off towards the Chicago area, where we could potentially be seeing at most around a foot of snow as well. So thank you guys so much for watching. If you did enjoy the video, please be sure to leave a like, subscribe if you're new, turn on notifications, share this with friends and family on social media. Also follow me on social media. Link will be in the description down below. We will also have someone else be creating a video tomorrow. We're going to be introducing some new people onto the channel that are going to be uploading some more content, and I hope you guys welcome them warmly. We'll have Tyler and we'll have Riley, and of course they've chased for us before, so it's not really something too out of the ordinary, but at the same time, I ask that you guys be kind to them in their first video for the channel tomorrow. So once again, thank you guys so much for watching. And my channel will catch you guys tomorrow, but it'll be a new host just for tomorrow's video. Peace out.